It's almost summer, and we've got some great advice for you about your deck. You may be trying to enjoy it right now, but it could be one of the most dangerous parts of your house. We're talking to Tim Kraeutler, host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Money Pit. So how likely is it that there's a problem with anybody's deck that's watching the show right now?
Pretty likely. There's 40 million decks in this country that are more than 20 years old. Now, the average deck life is 10 to 15 years.
Is that all?
That's right.
That's it?
That's it. That's it. That's all you're going to get.
Why? Because they're made out of bad materials?
Well, they're made out of wood, plus they're affected by the weather and all the winds, and there's just a lot of forces that are working against them. So if you have an older deck like that, you could be at high risk of a failure. And look, Gerri, every single summer we hear these reports. It's usually when you have, 20 or 30 of your closest personal friends on that deck for a party.
Just put your friends at risk.
Exactly.
I heard a great story about this today. Somebody told me they had a deck collapse at their house, right? In the middle of a party. They just kept partying. Okay, so let's talk about warning signs, because you kind of can tell if something bad's going to happen. How?
The most common way that decks fail is when the ledger board separates from the house.
What?
So the ledger board is the beam that connects the deck to the house. Now, if that's just nailed, it's not enough. You need to use bolts on something like that, but that's the weak point. Now, as a consumer, there are really 5 things that you can check for. The first one is missing connections or loose connectors. If you see loose connections,
that mean the screws?
Well, it could be the stairs, it could be the railings, it could be the beams. If they're loose, that's a problem. The second thing is missing connectors, because when you put the floor joists together, when you put the railings together, you have to use brackets. And these brackets actually tie all these pieces together and can stand up to that kind of breeze.
Let me ask you about this, because sometimes what you see is some of the metal pieces, they're falling apart.
Yeah,
they're all
corrosion.
rusty.
Yeah, you know why that is? The pressure-treated lumber has an extremely corrosive effect on the fasteners. So you have to use fasteners that are specially designed for pressure-treated lumber. So if you see corrosion, that's a big problem. Another one, of course, is rot. I mean, rot is just everywhere when it comes to wood components. So if you see decayed wood, if you can stick a screwdriver in it or something like that, that's a problem. And, of course, cracked beams. If you see cracks in the railings, cracks in the posts, cracks in the joists, they need to be replaced.
I'm wondering, because you are a former home inspector, extraordinaire, I might add. Should you have these things inspected? I mean, let's say it's still my house. I'm not buying a new house, but I'm concerned. Should I bring an inspector?
Listen, I think it's a great idea to have a home inspector come in every 5 years or so and really look at your house from top to bottom. It's like getting a physical, right? And when it comes to the deck, the trained eye of the inspector can spot these problems way before you can. I can give you 5 quick tips on what to check for, but inspector's going to see a lot more than that.
Okay, so how do I test it myself, though, if I'm concerned and I don't want to go spend $300 or $400 for an inspector?
Yeah, well, those are things you should look for. And we talked about the loose connections and the missing connectors, things like that you can see. That's sort of 5-point inspection.
Materials that are more heavy duty, like you say pressure-treated wood, but aren't there other materials that are better?
Well, let's talk about the decking surface. Now, composites, I think, are far better than the pressure treated for the decking surfaces, the railings and the boards. I mean, a lot of people don't like the splinters that happen, that sort of thing. So I think composites are good. Pressure treated is still the right choice, though, for the structure. You just need to use the right fasteners so they're not going to rust away.
So good. Such great advice. And we had such a bad winter.
We did.
That must mean that it's all that more important to check.
If you think about it, that snow is very heavy. It almost weighs as much as water, which is 8 pounds per gallon. All of that water, all of that ice, all of that salt on those decks from that winter.
Freezes, it expands when it melts.
It really can put a lot of stress on them. And so you really need to do that inspection now, before you have a party, before you start using that deck every day.
Before you put your kids on it.
Before you put your kids on it. Get it checked out.
Tim Kraeutler, thank you.
You're welcome.